Okay, welcome back. Right, so in this part we're going to learn how to have gravity influence our object. Okay, so if you haven't seen the previous two parts of this, please go check them out, because this is simply a continuation of our bounce plugin. Okay, so let's create some forces to act on our object right here. Now the force we know that we are going to actually need is gravity. Okay, so I don't need this anymore for now, at least. So some forces that we need, we have to put at the top here, because we don't want them to be changing every time we run this. So let me add, let me put a comment like that, just to show that this is another section. I want to have gravity, so I'm going to add gravity at a value of 10. So this value is arbitrary, you can add any value you want. I just like 10 in this instant. So we are creating initial values that we want to run, to be used as reference every time this function actually runs. So another thing we need is we need to know the mass of our object, because when we are dealing with gravity, we need to know how much our object weighs. So let's try mass is equal to 30. Again, that number has no meaning whatsoever. You can put any number that you want. These are just arbitrary numbers. And also we need to give it a bounce value, because we have to be able to set how bouncy our object is. So I'll set this one at 15 for no apparent reason. Then we need to know the velocity of the object. We need to know the speed, right? So let's set this at 0, because when starting, our object will be at 0. Then we need to know the position y of our object, like the initial start position, because we want the object to fall from a certain height. So I'm just going to give it a value of 5 meters, something like that. And then what else do we need? We need the ground level. We need to know the ground position, because we want this thing to bounce. So it should be able to know that now it has reached the ground. So the ground is at y is equal to 0. So let's put it at 0. Let's also create a start time, because sometimes we don't want the simulation to start at from 0, so we can adjust that. And one more thing we need, not really necessary, but we can use it. It's called the time step. Now the time step, I'm going to put it at 0.03. Now what time step is just a way for us to increase the speed or reduce the speed of our simulation if we need to. So I put 0.03 because during my testing, this is what worked better. But you can put any number, of course. So by adjusting this, we can change the speed of our simulation. Now we are ready to begin, since we have all the initial values that we require. Now to start with, before we even put a bounce, I just want this object to fall under the influence of gravity. So to do that, we know the formulas for gravity. Let me move this down a little bit. We know that the equation for force is equal to mass times acceleration. But in this case, we are looking at gravity. So let's use gravity, acceleration due to gravity. So let's do that. Gravity, like so. So this is our force right now. Mass times gravity, which is this number times this number. So 10 times that, that's 300. So now we have a force of some kind. But we need to know how much to accelerate our object. So let's create an acceleration value. Now acceleration is equal to, we know that force is equal to mass times acceleration. So if we change the subject of the formula, we get to a point where acceleration becomes, what would that be? It becomes force over mass. So since we have the mass, we have the force, we can get some acceleration up in here. Now this will lead us to know the velocity. How fast is our object moving? So we're going to say velocity is equal to velocity plus acceleration, like so. Now why are we adding the same velocity in the equation? It's because, let's say for example, we have our velocity 0 to start with. So we're going to say velocity will be equal to 0 plus the acceleration. Now let's say the acceleration was at value 10. The next time we do this calculation, since velocity is at the top here, it means whatever value we set is going to remain even the next time this thing runs. Okay, this value, whatever value we set to velocity, will not change even for the next time. That's why we put it up here. Now let's say it's 10 this time. It's going to be velocity is equal to 10 plus acceleration, so which means the velocity will be changing, the speed will be changing every time we change our frame number. The velocity will increase. So this is a good way, exactly how gravity works. The speed increases over time because gravity is actually an acceleration. Now we need to know where the position of our object will be at this point. So we're going to say position is equal to position, because we are also adding to this position. We'll say position plus the velocity, like that. Now the thing is, don't forget we have a time step here. We want to be able to adjust the speed of all this, because if I just run it like this will be really fast. That's why I have a time step of 0.3 to reduce that speed to understandable values. Now before I put the time step, let me just show you what we have so far. Now the vector here, let's move the vector back to 0, 0, 0, and then we just want to adjust the position y of our vector like so. So we're adjusting the y, leaving the others at 0, and then giving that vector to our object. So let's see what monstrosity we have created here. So if you observe, if I add the bounce, okay, so sometimes that can happen where the plugin is not being added. It means the thing has errors in it. That's why it's not being added. So let's look around and see what errors we have created. Now usually such errors are syntax errors, meaning we haven't typed something correctly in here. So what could we have forgotten? Maybe a semicolon, maybe a comma, or something like that. So let me go back here and see if I can spot it, and I cannot spot it. Something weird here. Everything looks good so far. Okay, so troubleshooting in this plugin setup is actually quite a pain. So what I do sometimes is just delete some things like here, and then once I delete them, I try to load it again. If it loads, then I know the problem is right there. But in this case, it's not loading, so the problem isn't there. So let me undo this. Go back up here, and let me delete these guys. Or you can cut them instead of deleting. And now that it's actually adding, it means the problem is up there. Okay, so let me do some escape, remove it. So that's where the error is that's stopping us from. So have we forgotten a semicolon? No, we have semicolons at the end. We have bounce. Yeah, for some reason I actually couldn't see it, but bounce has no equal sign here. Pretty dumb, right? Alright, so there we go. So bounce is equal to 15. So that was the problem right there. So errors can be a pain sometimes, but we have to live with them. So there we go. Now the bounce, as you can see, the object has gone really high like that, and it disappears instantly. So this is why we need a time step to reduce this amount. So we multiply this by time step so that the movement is smaller in between frames. So let's see how that fares. So let me remove this, and then we see increasing in speed. But of course gravity is a pulling force, it's not a pushing upward. So what we need to do is change the gravity to -10. So let me go back here, remove that, and there we go, something falling under the influence of gravity, falling forever. Alright, so that's it for this part. In the next part, we're going to see how we can actually add a bounce so that this thing doesn't keep falling forever. Alright, so if you like this tutorial, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll see you in the next part.